Hi guys, this is Jordan. This is the University of Mary Capstone Oral Presentation. I did my internship with Centura Health here in Denver, Colorado, and the title of my paper is Founding Ethically Challenging Policy Development on Leadership and Respect. Now, I did most of my internship experience shadowing a manager in the ethics department of corporate headquarters, and we worked mostly with implementation of their opt-out policy for medical aid in dying in Colorado. And the dilemma that the manager and I came up with together was as follows. How does a major healthcare organization successfully roll out a controversial policy among multi-sponsor hospitals while ensuring consideration of the ethical component of the policy? Further, how does one, from a corporate standpoint, enhance dialogue with and support for employees on the front line in implementing such a policy while also prioritizing that hospital's culture and values? It's a big dilemma, and I think I bit off a little more than I could chew, but I gave it my best shot. So again, the context of this dilemma is in particular for the medical aid in dying law that passed recently in Colorado and is now in law. And then also just taking that into consideration in the context of a religious healthcare system, one in which the mission is to extend the healing ministry of Christ. And how do you go about implementing a policy about this new legislation? And in particular, there was the possibility with this new law for a healthcare organization to opt out. But we wanted to focus on how does an organization go about doing this. So the ethical decision-making framework that I used was a little bit different as well. I went ahead with one put together by Integrated Ethics, which is actually a division of the Veterans Health Administration. So I didn't think this was a traditional ethics dilemma. I wanted to think a little bit outside the box and also use something that was secular and mainstream and scholarly. And Integrated Ethics of the VA seemed like a really good fit for this. There's 3 sections of Integrated Ethics, and it's shaped, the way they frame it is it's shaped like an iceberg. And at the very top of the surface, you see decisions and actions, and then somewhere just below that, you have systems and processes, and then way underneath the surface is the environment and the culture. So really what I wanted to focus on with this dilemma was that third level. We want to talk about the environment and culture of the organization. So the ethical decision-making framework in this culture and environment, the very deepest part of the iceberg, what the VA emphasizes is leadership. Leadership is the heart and soul of an a good ethical organization. And so they talk about the compass points here of ethical leadership, including demonstrate that ethics is a priority, communicate clear expectations for ethical practice, practice ethical decision making, and support your local ethics program. So also embedded within that, especially in the practicing ethical decision making, is being informed, participatory, values-based, systems-focused, and reasonable. So there's a lot there. I'm just going to go through that pretty briefly. Talking about the culture with the leadership compass points, again, there was 4 of them. So number 1, we have demonstrate that ethics is a priority. And here in my paper and in the experience, I really wanted to highlight the importance of showing interest and goodwill from the point of corporate, branching out to all the hospitals involved in the healthcare system, and offering them value first before stepping in and dictating what they should do. Certainly that's not a great idea. And then it's also important here to dispel myths such as the corporate stigma. And further, it's a good idea to have system-wide ethics committees where you can actually bring in the leaders of all these hospitals to come work with corporate in these ethics committees. So the second point in culture in developing leadership is communicate clear expectations for ethical practice. So this is something that I actually did quite a bit with with my internship is just identifying who are the leaders and when are your meetings, and just emphasizing how important it is that corporate knows that you are meeting and it's interested in when you're meeting so that they can actually attend and participate. And then regarding policy, it's really important to have a very clear policy that really doesn't leave any room for interpretation. And then it's also just important to have question and answer sessions where people can really dig in and ask, what's this policy all about? So that's the second point of leadership culture. Third and fourth points, practice ethical decision making. Here again, we just want to highlight the importance of using systematic ethical decision making framework. So a framework in the organization that every hospital is familiar with. There was a particular framework used at Centura where I did my internship. And it's called Values in Action. But it's really important just that everybody gets on the same page and they organize their thoughts in a very similar manner so they can all speak the same language. Finally, support your local ethics program. So that's the fourth point of the leadership compass. And this is something that I really highlighted in my paper, and I want to talk about just a tiny bit. Just the importance of developing the local team and backing them up within their hospital. And that's so important. And here's the perfect opportunity to talk about the principle of subsidiarity. And I really brought in parts of the book Respect in Action by Dr. Naughton and also by Professor Maines. Ethical decision-making quality check. So this is the second portion of my paper when we actually go through all the checkpoints. Number one is to be informed. And again, this is so important to know the law and how it applies. What does it actually say? And also, who's involved? What are the levels of involvement for the organization? Does it affect doctors, nurses, pharmacy? And in the case of medical aid and dying, it really affects almost everybody. And pharmacy is very involved as well. So the law would have to be very clear, the policy would have to be very clear about how or who can be involved in this. And next, the ethical decision-making quality check, we have being participatory. Here's a conversation about stakeholders. And some of the stakeholders that we talked about in the paper are the sponsors of the hospital. So in the case of Centura, that's the Catholic Church and also the Adventist Church who work together with this organization. It's a collaborative arrangement. And then also patients, talk about stakeholders. And further, again, emphasizing in this paper, the local ethics leaders, so the ethics committees of each individual hospital. And integrated ethics really says that we should be working with these to develop these committees. And involving them could involve ad hoc subgroups, but more than anything, we just want to emphasize the importance of subsidiarity and engaging these groups who are very affected by the policy and its implementation. Next, on the quality check is that the development of policy should be values-based. Here again, we look at the values of the sponsors because they're really the source of the values of the organization, and they inform the corporate of what kind of care we're actually talking about in this organization. Other sources of values are professional values, so you can talk about medical and nursing values, and medical values especially are kind of unclear right now regarding medical aid and dying in particular. And then within society, of course, there's always the importance of respecting autonomy. And also currently in society, there's a really strong emphasis on empathy and relieving suffering. So that's very relevant to the discussion here in medical aid and dying. Next, the policy development should be beneficial. So we think about the long-term effects on stakeholders. And again, the stakeholders being ethics leaders in the hospitals themselves, the sponsors, and then also the patients. And we want to look beyond just merely pleasing certain patients or getting the majority of patients. We want to focus on providing the quality of care integrated with our values and emphasize that it's a unique type of care that actually many patients value. Next, we want to be systems focused, and we don't want to be insular or just focus on one particular issue, but we wanted to address the entire system and include all the incentives in the hospital, policies and procedures. Just keep an eye out for the whole organization rather than just focusing on one little tiny problem. And the goal here is to prevent moral uncertainty and also workarounds. And I saw some of those workarounds in my internship. So then we also want to be reasonable. And by reasonable, integrated ethics means to say, how would this decision look to someone outside of the organization? We just want to be able to defend the policy. We want to be able to engage in conversation about it, and it's really important to use your ethics committees to work this out and engage in this conversation. It's a dialectic, and while we do that, we're going to really refine our organizational convictions. It's going to make us stronger. It's going to make us be able to say, no, this is what we stand for, and simply not be afraid to proclaim that. Finally, with the courses of action, I didn't get into this a great deal in my paper, but you can definitely say that there's two ideas that you could go with here. Number one is to implement the policy, and for corporate to implement the policy and demand compliance across the whole system. And that's not the answer that I recommend or suggest in the paper at all. It's kind of the hidden alternative to what I offer here. Rather, the corporate team, the ethics team, should really work on a two-step integration of leadership and quality decision making. And again, the importance of leadership and raising and nurturing leadership all across the system, but especially in the ethics leadership in the individual hospital ethics committees is absolutely important. It's imperative. So the two steps are prior to implementation and during development and implementation. So prior to implementation, I just recommend doing a leadership assessment, and that is using the compass suggested by integrated ethics to really assess where is our organization at right now. What's the leadership look like all across the organization, especially in these ethics committees? And I give a number of ideas of how to really gauge that. But also just to consider this in a way, a timeout, a procedural timeout, just to reflect on where the organization is. And then the second step is to emphasize the role of leadership throughout development and implementation. So by that I mean to integrate the 4 compass points by integrated ethics and bring them and infuse them into the quality check, the decision-making quality check. And in this case, really emphasize supporting the localized ethics team and make this the forefront of corporate leadership, at the forefront of their mind throughout the whole process. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Again, it was a really good experience shadowing with the manager and getting to know the corporate team, but also getting in and seeing things at play in the individual hospitals themselves. And really got to see some interesting interpretations of policy and things gone wrong and also things gone really well. So the way I see it is I caught a glimpse of different mindsets and the importance of really focusing on those mindsets while you implement the policy and kind of direct all your efforts into forming the culture of the organization. And in the case of integrated ethics, the heart and soul of that development should really be surrounding your ethical leaders. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you guys soon.